Get rid of the tigers, get rid of the lions, get rid of the elephants?
No. I went to circus this year, did you?
I didn't.
Well, I've been to Africa a number of times, and I can tell you that I've seen quite a few African lions. They had one African lion at this year's Shriner Circus. It was by far the most magnificent lion I've ever seen in terms of its overall physical conditioning and its simple, glorious mane the animal wore. But I'll bet you that animal's never been wild. I'll bet you that animal was born in captivity. I bet you its mother and father were born in captivity. So it is a domestic animal for all practical purposes. Whether or not you're using too much, well, look, you can't have an animal that looks that good and abuse it. It just isn't possible. Has there been abuse of animals in circuses? Of course there has. Anything that human beings do, somebody sooner or later is going to do it wrong. We want to fix that. To take the animals out of the circus pretends something that isn't true. Animals aren't people, no matter what anybody thinks. For instance, a lion sleeps like 20 hours a day normally. You know, they aren't roaming all around. They just get up and go kill something, and then they go lie down again after they eat it. So they're not the same as you and I. But if you look at it sensibly, it's like, what are you going to do with them? Maybe it makes sense to stop breeding them. I don't know. But they are property still. That's the thing that's actually being attacked here, is the notion that animals can be property. So this means if you own a cat or a canary or whatever you own, because what's the difference between an elephant and a canary? I mean, other than
Sounds like a joke.
tons, right? But it's the same. Both are animals, right? So if you can keep a canary in your cage, and the canary's supposed to fly free, are you being cruel? Boy, you're going to have an awfully hard time convincing people of that.
Lions and tigers and bears?
Oh my. Well, I not having given too much thought about this particular issue, but not wanting to leave Harry on his own, I guess, against two very, very well-reasoned arguments. I think it's interesting that the argument may be in opposition to the circus today. What about the zoo 10, 20 years from now? Maybe it's already there. I don't know. And I think that to some extent you have a lot of young children who are introduced to animals as kids through the opportunity to see them at the zoo. And again, I don't want to speak specifically to the issues of the circus, but that to me, again, you're sort of going over a line that you may not want to cross. And then if the zoos are somehow bad, then what about a game reserve? I mean, I was fortunate enough because I had the opportunity to go to South Africa as part of a commission and had a chance to take a weekend at a game preserve and actually see lions and zebras and elephants in the wild. But, is that going to be enough? I mean, and then do we have to get into the specific square mileage that the game preserve has to be on in order for the animals to be free enough? I just don't know the answer to that question, but I think that once you get to that discussion, you then get in, it's a proverbial slippery slope, and that can get difficult.
Last word on this, Beth. Newell's point, zoos and circuses essentially the same for the purpose of your argument.
Well, I mean, they're the same in the sense that each time you take an animal issue and you start to study it, you see the dark side of the particular industry. And then you get into these difficult questions, and you can't throw up your hands just because a question is difficult. And that's why we're in the education mode right now of the animal rights movement, is that we're asking ourselves difficult questions. And sometimes we have to put things that are part of our childhood in the past, and that's hard.
Let's move on to a perhaps even more difficult question. That's the whole subject of the use of animals in medical research. Walter?
Yeah, pretty significant issue. We're seeing now, and especially as we see videos and photographs and things along those lines, a pretty significant concern about the treatment of animals that are being used in testing. I guess it's easier when it comes to mice and things like that for some people, because I mean, mice and rats, I'm not sure we're not as concerned about those, but certainly when you're dealing with animal experimentation and testing, when it comes to cosmetic products, a number of them test on animals that, as simple as the soft and furry ones, as Harry said. Some of the tests that are done on rabbits these days are pretty significant. I say these days, I'm not even sure if they're still doing it, in terms of dropping literally perfumes and certain things into the rabbit's eyes to test them to see what their reaction will be. This doesn't just happen once, it happens hundreds, if not thousands of times over many, many hours. I think most people would agree that's kind of not a great idea, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we could do something other than that? to do that testing, especially for something as simple as cosmetics. But the bigger issue, of course, is animal experimentation and testing when it comes to major medical illnesses for humans, top of the food chain. Can't we do that and make that better?
Right, real quick, my old college roommate, it's an AIDS researcher, and he runs a lab in Massachusetts where they experiment with chimpanzees in an effort to help wipe out this horrible human scourge of AIDS. Should we be doing that?
Well, that's always a difficult question, but I think one thing we can agree on is that there's tons of testing when people are just coming up with a new shampoo. And so there's so much needless testing, and also the way the animals are treated in the test. There's a minimum amount of laws covering the animals while they're being in experiments, and that's one thing we can work on. And we also have to look back, and just because someone has a white coat on, are they really involved in intelligent experimentation that's not being duplicated down the street by another group of people doing the same thing. So there's a lot of room here, and it's another one of those difficult issues that I think it needs a good look at, and the public right now can go out and make sure that they purchase products that are not tested on animals.
Well, we can agree on shampoos probably. Harry, real quick, last word.
Well, I certainly would agree with the concept if you're going to have to use animals in tests, to treat them as well as possible and to police those who test them very rigorously. That's a great idea. I don't think any normal human being wants to cause any more suffering than they have to. But when you think about the things that have happened because of animal experimentations over the years in finding solutions to many of our major medical problems, it's very hard to see how they aren't justified.
Last question for everybody, 20 seconds if you could. Government regulation, too much, too little, we doing enough, should we be doing more? Robert?
We need a lot more. We're just in the beginning of where we need to go. Another thing, and just to pick up on the point before, animals are not, they are property, and that's where the issue is. They should not be property. They should be treated like a couch or something else, and we need to move away from that argument.
Thanks. Beth?
Oh, I'd like more regulation.
More regulation.
I think we have, and I think Robert made the point earlier, we have the second toughest set of animal welfare laws in the United States right now. I think more regulation at this point is only going to burden the law-abiding, responsible dog owners and dog breeders of the state. And in fact, the folks that you're trying to get at, the hoarders, the folks with perhaps some mental health issues that collect a lot of dogs and cats, or the people who are responsible high-volume breeders who are just deliberately trying to flaunt the law, they're not going to follow the restrictions that are on the books now, much less any new ones that are going to pass. You're only going to add burden to the responsible law-abiding people.
Harry, more regulation?
More regulation, fine-tuning. If you think that people and animals should be together, if you are part of the movement that think animals have to be separate, then there's never be enough laws for them. They'll just want another law, another law, another law. So,
Thanks. Now, we've talked about animal rights laws here in the state of Maine, but as we all know, there's a separate part of Maine called West Gardner where Gary Crocker reigns. We're going to hear from Gary.